Hey everybody, Bill in Virginia. Welcome back to another episode in Adventures in Model Railroading with Bill. Well, I have had back surgery about a week ago. And this is the first time that I've been out to the layout since then. Doing some convalescing. Can't stand very long and definitely cannot do any twisting and turning. But what I'm going to do today is the third part in my three-part series on tree building using the rustic wire. In in this episode, I'm going to make a couple of deciduous trees. So on my HO scale layout near the engine shops, I have a couple of Woodland Scenics pre-made trees, deciduous trees, and they look good. Nothing wrong with them. But I'm going to use the rustic wire. I'm going to scale these trees to be more realistic. If you look at a building like this, doors 6, 8, 12, maybe 20 feet at the pitch of the roof. So the tree's just a little over that. I can make them a little bit bigger and scale them, and they're going to look good. So I'm going to use the rustic wire. I'm going to use the Seafoam Scenic Tree or Scenic Express tree material. I'm going to use the heat shrink as well as potentially some other materials to build these. So this is going to be, for me anyway, a long project, as I'm not going to be in the shop layout area doing much at any given time. But let's see how this goes. Should be kind of a fun build to take a tree that has a nice shape, but you cannot see through it. It doesn't look realistic from that perspective, and make a nice old oak tree sitting right there. So moving into the construction phase on my oak tree for the HO scale layout, I've got the basic materials laid out here. I am looking to build a tree that overall is between about 6 inches ish high, and that includes the foliage piece and trunk, limbs, etc. So what I've got here is a pile of rustic wire cut to various lengths that represent the trunk of the tree and limbs. I have a 3/8 inch piece of dowel cut to approximately 3 inches, which is going to be the core of the tree. So what I'm going to do is I will build up the rustic wire around the core of the tree. I'll use a super glue to kind of fix it on there, and I'll fix it one wire at a time and then kind of roll it around. You'll see what I do here in a minute. But when I'm building this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these smaller pieces of wire and affix them first just at what I'm considering the base of the tree. That way the other wire that goes onto it will kind of have a little bump out to kind of look like the roots starting to go into the ground. I will also take maybe one, maybe two of these wires, let them overhang the base just a little bit so that I can kind of bend those as well to represent the roots that are in the ground. The rest of these will represent branches. Some of them will be singular coming off the tree. Some of them will be a couple, maybe 2 or 3 to represent the core of the tree. Just to kind of give it a good full look as it moves upward into the sky. Then on the branches, I'll do like what I've done on the pine trees, is I will take the Scenic Express Seafoam, the super trees, and I will use heat shrink to connect those pieces to the ends or tips of limbs as I get to that point. The rest of the process is going to be the same. I'm going to super glue, wrap it around, continue to glue until I get the core covered, come back in with wood glue, fill those in, shape the tree, add ground cover, and take it on up. So next piece is going to be a little montage at different stages of the construction of this. Well, here I am showing progress that I'm making on the oak tree build. Since the start of the video to this point, it's been 4 days. Those of you that watch my videos know that I'm very impatient, but after having gotten my back cut open and some surgery work, I'm not out here very much, just a little bit. But anyway, so I've got the basics of the tree shape done. I've added the smaller pieces in this area, and I've still got some more to put on, and then I will start to give it some shape, and then the fun part comes using the wood glue to start shaping. But I should have it in basic shape and ready for the wood glue, and then the ground cover application to kind of bulk things up here in just a few minutes. That'll be the next piece. So about 15 minutes later, and I've got the basic shape of the tree done. So you can see down at the bottom where I put some of the rustic wire to make it look like some roots coming off. A little dead branch hanging off down at the bottom. I've got the rest of the wires in basic shape that I want. Now they're all pretty much too long. I will come back in and I will do some trim. Oh, look at that. And get this ready so that when I add on the sea foam, I'll have a little bit of a spot for the heat shrink. The sea foam, I'll put super glue on the bottom, put that in there and extend that out so I can build the body of the tree. All of these will be trimmed down so that I get a nice overall effect that's no higher than about 6.5, 7 inches. So the next step is to start going in, putting the carpenter's glue, wood glue, and building up the tree. Here's one that I've been working on. So it's a little farther along. I have put in some of the wood glue and added the Woodland Scenics ground foam to start building up the trunk. You can see I've still got a lot of work to do on it yet. I've got gaps, different things of that. Still got to do the top, but you know, when I get a little bit farther along, then it's going to look like this armature. This armature is ready for O-scale application of the Seafoam, Scenic Express material. Still have to cut these down a little bit to final shape and length, but this trunk has had all applications of glue and ground foam and is ready for that next step. But let's get this one going further. So this is one of my favorite parts of the build, taking the tree armature that you're working on, adding the wood glue and starting to build it up. So this is done in many, many different little layers. Just kind of rubbing the glue on in the valleys. You don't need to worry about getting too much on. Well, actually you do. You don't want to get too much on. You want to just kind of get it spread out nicely to start. And you only want to do a little bit of the trunk at a time so that you're not getting a lot of runs and drips. You can see how the glue will kind of fill in a little bit, and it doesn't have to be a lot, but it'll start to build that feeling that you actually have a tree trunk that you've got that you're working on here. So we'll just do a little bit more, and then I will put some of the Woodland Scenics turf material on it. There we go. That should be enough for right now. Probably more than enough. Probably going to have some drips, but that's okay. So it's very well saturated, but you can still see the shapes. And then just simply sprinkle the ground foam on it. And as I've said in the other videos, you know, you want to put enough on so that it covers, so that the glue's not running too much. You know, you've got it where you need it. You can always come back in and add more material to the trunk if the glue soaks through. And you can see already it saturates in areas where the glue is kind of on the thick side. But you also have already some nice roots that are coming out. You've got the nice branches that are out here. And, you know, once this is all spray painted at the end, this is going to look pretty good. So I'm going to set this aside to dry, and then I'm going to go in the house. I'm going to lay down. I've done too much already, and I'm feeling it in my back. But you get an idea. So next one, I should have this trunk pretty well far along. It might be a couple of more days for me, but it's only going to be a few seconds for you. So, all right, back in a bit. All right, making progress. I've got the trunk pretty well done with the wood glue and ground cover application. Still got to do the top and fill in a little bit around it, but I did cut the crown to the basic shape that I want. On each of those little limbs, then I will put some heat shrink and the seafoam, cut to size for what I'm after to kind of build up the crown of that particular tree. I will apply some wood glue to each of the limbs and kind of rub it in, and then put ground cover on it again to kind of give it the same overall texture as the trunk of the tree. But we're making good progress. So next little snippet should have this one pretty well done and ready for the application of the seafoam. Basic prep of the trunk of the tree is completed. The glue has set, and I'm ready for the next step. So I have a dozen short pieces of heat shrink tubing cut for the branches and limbs on the tree. I have a variety of the seafoam from Scenic Express, roughly cut and ready for application on the tree. Next step will be to take the heat shrink, and I will trim each of the branches and get the heat shrink on it. And then I'll start to choose which of these is going to go where. That piece right there is probably going to be the crown of the tree. It's got a nice shape to it overall, and I think that would look good getting me up to where I want it to be. I will trim it back a little bit. Again, it'll probably put me well over my 6 inches, but it'll still look good and be well within scale for HO. So I'll trim this down a little bit, and I'm going to get started on this next step. So a little bit more coming up here. So for this step, I have the heat shrink tubing loosely on the branches, and I will adjust it so that they are approximately halfway on here as I start to add foliage. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my pieces of seafoam, and this is going to be the crown of the tree. I'm going to apply a drop of super glue, well, my thumb's in the way, on the base, and then insert it into the heat shrink. That way it glues both to the heat shrink and to the limb, my armature that I have in there. Then I'm going to take and use my soldering iron, and immediately I'm going to heat shrink around that particular piece of foliage, simply because as I work my way down the trunk, I'm going to start to have access issues. The tree is held in simply with a nail that I glued into the bottom. That's my attachment point, and in the pink foam that I've got on my HO scale layout, pretty easy. Just pops right in, and then I'll do scenic work around the tree just to make it look good. So a little bit more here as I get some of the foliage on. Starting to take shape. I've got the upper branches on, heat shrink around, working my way down the tree, but I think this is going to look pretty good. Show you when I get it done here, just before painting. So there we go. There is the basic oak tree. Yeah, I think that's going to look good when I get it all finished. So the next step is painting, but it is not painting the tree itself. It's going to get a little brush with a little bit of glue, and I'm going to paint up the shrink wrap and then sprinkle some ground turf on it, just so that it blends in well with the rest of the tree trunk. And then after that sets for a few minutes, time to paint. There we go. The heat shrink has been blended in. I'm going to let this sit for just a few minutes, and before I lose daylight, take it outside and paint it a camo brown with a few gray highlights just on some of the trunk pieces. But I think this is going to look pretty good. So we're getting close. Once I get it painted and it dries, then we'll be able to put the material on for leaves and plan it on the layout. So here's the tree. It has now been painted, and I'm letting it dry for just a little bit before I go on to the next step, which is adding foliage. You can kind of see HO scale compared to O scale size trees. So you can get a lot of detail even in HO scale using this method, and N scale as well. You just have to be careful on what you do and don't use quite as much material. So what I'm going to do for this is I'm going to take it and I'm going to use Max Hold hairspray. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to spray it from the bottom up, and I'll hold it upside down, obviously, and then sort of spray it this way. And I'm going to sprinkle on a darker green for the underside of the tree. I'm going to use Woodland Scenics Fine Turf Weeds. Gives a nice green color. Then after I get that on, I'm going to go back and I'm going to give it a few more shots of hairspray. And I'm going to come back, and on the top of the branches, I'm going to use blended turf. Now, I am not going to just dump or, really saturate it with material. I've seen some guys do that, and the results look good. But what I find is better is to go kind of light on the materials at the start, go back, give it some more hairspray, and then fill in on the ends of the branches where it naturally would be thicker. Gives it a little bit more airy, airy appearance in the middle, but it gives you the leaves where the leaves are, which tends to be out on the outer edges of the branches. So right now my back is aching, but I want to get at least the basics done on this before I call it a day. So I'm not going to video it. It's no different than what you've seen in my furnace filter pine tree video and the pine with a twist video. So next segment's going to show this, basically a done tree. And there we go. There is the HO scale oak tree. It is looking pretty good. I will let it dry, and then I'll come back in and brush off the trunk and give it a plant. But this is going to look pretty good on the HO scale layout. A big old tree, but should not overpower anything on my scenery. So last segment is going to show it in place. And out with the old. And in with the new. So I've got the tree in place. I've got to do detail work on the ground around it. But you know what? That looks like a nice big old oak tree. Just right there behind one of the machine shops, yard office. It stands out. It's at about the right height. Yeah, about a little over a 2.5 story building. So I like it. I really like how that turned out. I'm going to make another one a little bit smaller that's going to go there. And I will add a few other small ones in probably some other areas of the layout as well. That turned out quite well. I'm quite happy with it. So I will fill in the old hole. I will get some ground cover around the roots, and a little bit of scenic work in here when I feel like it. But that concludes this series on building a oak tree utilizing the rustic wire. So thanks for watching, and keep having fun on your layouts.